Listen to that sound. That soft, almost metallic whisper of woven thread against stone. In the year 200 AD, that sound meant one thing to a Roman merchant standing in Alexandria: money. Not a symbol of money, not a representation of money. That fabric, that specific bolt of Chinese silk, was money. It held a precise, universally agreed-upon value across 12,000 kilometers of hostile terrain, from the workshops of the Han Dynasty to the markets of Imperial Rome. Here is the paradox that opens this investigation. Rome, the most powerful military empire the ancient world had ever produced, ran a permanent trade deficit with China. The Roman Senate passed legislation in 14 AD explicitly restricting the purchase of silk because the outflow of gold and silver to the east was measurably weakening the Roman monetary system. Pliny the Elder documented it in his Naturalis Historia. Rome was losing the equivalent of 100 million sesterces per year to Eastern trade, a balance of payments crisis in the 1st century AD. But the silk was only the surface. Beneath the caravans, beneath the bolts of cloth and the jars of spice, there operated a financial infrastructure of extraordinary sophistication, a system of credit, settlement, and monetary sovereignty that most people alive today have never heard of. This episode will excavate that system layer by layer, the way a forensic accountant reads a balance sheet. Not for what it shows, but for what it reveals. If this kind of financial archaeology, the serious excavation of how power and money actually moved through history, is what you came here for, subscribe now. Every episode on this channel goes deeper than the surface story. This is the channel for people who understand that the past is not behind us. It is the blueprint. The silk was the commodity everyone saw. The secret was the system no one was supposed to understand. The Silk Road was not a road. That is the first thing to understand. It was a network, a distributed system of overlapping trade corridors operating across Central Asia, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean for roughly 1,500 years, from approximately 130 BC under the Han Dynasty to the mid-15th century AD. No single empire controlled it entirely. No single currency denominated it. And yet, value moved through it with a precision and reliability that most modern observers find genuinely surprising. The question that forensic accounting forces us to ask is not what moved along these routes, but how. Because moving physical gold or silver, even in segments across 12,000 kilometers of desert, mountain pass, and bandit territory, was not just impractical at the volumes the historical record documents, it was structurally impossible. The Roman Empire was not shipping tons of bullion east every year. Something else was happening. That something else was a sophisticated credit system. And the engineers of that system were a people most history textbooks mention in a single sentence, if at all: the Sogdians. The Sogdians were an Iranian-speaking merchant civilization based in the Zarafshan Valley in the territory of present-day Uzbekistan. Between roughly 300 and 1000 AD, they dominated the overland trade between China and the Mediterranean world with a competitive efficiency that no rival network could match. As the historian Étienne de la Vessière documented in his foundational study, Sogdian Traders, a history, Sogdian merchant colonies existed in every major city along the Central Asian routes, from Constantinople to the Chinese capital, from the Crimea to the Indian subcontract. They were functionally a private banking network stretched across Eurasia. Their hidden economics rested on a precise financial instrument: the letter of credit. A Sogdian merchant in Samarkand could deposit a quantity of goods, silk bolts, silver ingots, lapis lazuli, with a senior partner, and receive in exchange a written document acknowledging the deposit and authorizing a correspondent agent in a distant city to release an equivalent value of goods or currency to the bearer. Think of it as a check, or more precisely, as a wire transfer instruction operating across a correspondent banking network. exactly the structure that SWIFT uses today to move money between international banks. No gold traveled. The obligation traveled. And the obligation was as good as gold because it rested on something more reliable than metal, a network of verified relationships built over generations where default meant permanent exclusion, not just financial ruin, but social and commercial death across the entire network simultaneously. This is what the financial archaeology of the Silk Road actually reveals. The system's forgotten ledger, the true architecture of value exchange, was not precious metal. It was immutability, the permanent, unalterable record of who owed what to whom, enforced not by courts or governments, but by the reputation network of the Sogdian merchant diaspora itself. A debt recorded in Sogdian script on a piece of dried animal skin in 350 AD carried more enforceability across Central Asia than any imperial decree, because the network that enforced it operated everywhere the empire did not. The Sogdians built the first global credit network, then history buried them. The reason why tells us something important about how power actually works. To understand the weight of this system in practice, we need to look at the year 313 AD through the eyes of a Sogdian merchant named Nanaidat. His letter, one of 8 extraordinary documents discovered in 1907 by the British explorer Aurel Stein, sealed inside a postal relay tower on the western edge of the Great Wall, is held today in the British Library as part of the Ancient Sogdian Letters collection. It is the oldest surviving commercial correspondence from Central Asia, and it reads like a risk management report from a man watching a deal collapse in real time. Nanaidat writes to his business partner Nanai Duant back in Samarkand. He reports that the debtor who was supposed to settle a large outstanding obligation has fled Dunhuang without paying. He has been stranded in the city for 3 years waiting for settlement. He has no funds to return home. The counterparty risk, the risk that the other side of a financial transaction will fail to deliver, has destroyed him personally and professionally. But what the letter also reveals is the sophistication of the system around him. Nanaidat refers to network partners in at least 4 different cities, to goods held in escrow, and to a chain of credit obligations that extends from Dunhuang back to Samarkand. He is not just a traveling merchant, he is a node in a financial network. And the network failed him because one node defected. This single letter, written 16 centuries ago on a piece of goatskin, is a primary document in the forensic accounting of the ancient world. It shows, with human clarity, that the psychology of value, the belief that an obligation will be honored, was always the real asset. When that belief broke, the system broke with it. The Sogdian credit system solved a fundamental problem that all long-distance trade networks face. How do you verify that a transaction is legitimate when the buyer and seller are 1,000 kilometers apart, belong to different empires, speak different languages, and have no shared legal jurisdiction? Today, we solve this with SWIFT codes, correspondent bank agreements, and international commercial arbitration. The Sogdians solved it with a combination of personal reputation, family networks, and standardized written contracts. The contracts themselves were remarkably precise. Sogdian commercial documents recovered from Dunhuang and analyzed by the historian Nicholas Sims Williams at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London specify the principal amount, the interest rate, the repayment date, the penalty for default, and the names of witnesses, sometimes 4 or 5 of them, from different cities to ensure cross-network enforceability. These were not informal agreements. They were structured debt instruments, legally specific and operationally robust. The immutability of the record, the fact that witnesses signed it, multiple parties held copies, and the record existed in several cities simultaneously, made default costly in a way that no court system could have replicated. The other pillar of the system was Silk itself. And this is where the hidden economics become genuinely revelatory. Silk, in the context of Silk Road finance, was not simply a luxury commodity. Between approximately 200 BC and 900 AD, silk functioned as a reserve asset, what we would today call a sovereign wealth instrument. The Tang dynasty, which ruled China from 618 to 907 AD, paid its frontier military garrisons not in copper coins, but in bolts of silk. The official Tang administrative codes, preserved in the Sogdian compiled by Du Yu in 801 AD, specify exact silk-to-coin conversion ratios for taxation, salary payments, and treaty settlements. Silk was, in the precise technical sense, tokenized value, a physical object that represented a standardized unit of account, divisible, transportable, and universally recognized across sovereign borders. This is what monetization of a physical asset looks like before the invention of paper money. A bolt of silk was not just cloth, it was a bond, a sovereign-backed promise of value, issued by the Tang state's productive capacity and accepted by every major power from Japan to Byzantium. When the Tang emperor paid Tibetan war chiefs in silk, he was not giving them fabric. He was transferring monetary sovereignty, the power to command resources, in a form that the recipient could deploy anywhere on the network. The liquidity cycles this created were extraordinary. Silk entered the network from Chinese state workshops, was exchanged for horses and military services on the frontier, then traded westward by Sogdian intermediaries for silver and gold, which flowed back into the Roman and Byzantine monetary systems, and from there into the Arab world. Value circulated continuously, with silk acting as the collateral layer, the asset that gave every exchange its credibility. But if silk was the collateral and Sogdian credit was the infrastructure, who actually controlled access to the system? The answer to that question is the real institutional secret of the Silk Road. Access to the Silk Road's financial infrastructure was not open. The structure was deliberate, and the structure concentrated wealth with a precision that most modern observers would recognize immediately, because it follows a pattern that still governs elite capital management today. The Sogdian network operated through a system of tiered partnerships. At the top sat the senior merchant houses, families who had established correspondent relationships in multiple cities over multiple generations. Below them were junior partners and agents who operated on commission and credit extended by the senior houses. At the bottom were independent traders who could access the routes physically, but could not access the Sogdian credit instruments, the letters of credit, the debt contracts, the guaranteed settlement networks, without going through a senior house as intermediary. This architecture had a direct financial consequence. It created what economists call a toll position. Any merchant who wanted to move value reliably across the network, not just goods physically but financial obligations, had to pay for access to the Sogdian trust layer. The senior houses extracted a margin on every transaction that touched their correspondent network, not as a tax, not by force, but as a structural fee for the immutability they provided. Their intergenerational wealth defense rested on the same principle as a modern prime brokerage. You do not need to own the goods to profit from every trade that passes through your hands. The Sogdian wealth origins were, at their core, architectural. The senior merchant families did not accumulate capital by taking risk on individual trades. They accumulated it by owning the verification layer, the trusted network through which all others had to route their transactions. Their legacy assets were not warehouses full of silk. They were ledgers full of verified relationships, and those ledgers were inherited. This is the concept of the silent bloodline, not a dynasty of rulers, but a dynasty of methods. The specific Sogdian families declined, the network dissolved, but the method, build the trust layer, charge for access, pass the relationships to the next generation, survived. It reappeared in the Italian merchant banking families of the 12th century. It reappeared in the Dutch East India Company's correspondent networks in the 17th century. It reappears today in the correspondent banking relationships that define which financial institutions can clear international dollar payments. The ancient arbitrage that the Sogdian senior houses exploited was informational, not geographical. They knew the price of silk in Chang'an and the price of silver in Constantinople before any other market participant could. They moved between currency systems, Chinese copper cash, Tang silk bolts, Sasanian silver dirhams, Byzantine gold solidi, with a fluency that constituted a genuine sovereign wealth history, built not over years, but over centuries of accumulated market intelligence. Their forensic accounting was impeccable. The Sogdian contracts recovered from Dunhuang show consistent use of double-entry principles, each obligation recorded from both perspectives, with named witnesses on both sides of the transaction. The historian Valerie Hansen at Yale University, in her detailed analysis of the Dunhuang documents, notes that the legal precision of these contracts rivals anything produced in medieval Europe 3 centuries later. They were not improvising. They were executing a tested, inherited protocol. To understand how elite capital management operated at the sovereign level on the Silk Road, we need to look at the year 568 AD through the eyes of a Sogdian merchant prince named Maniak. Maniak was the senior commercial representative of the Western Turk Khaganate, the powerful nomadic empire that controlled the northern Silk Road routes through Central Asia in the 6th century. He was not a general or a diplomat. He was a financier, appointed to manage the economic relationships that kept the Khaganate solvent. And in 568 AD, he executed one of the most sophisticated diplomatic financial maneuvers in the early medieval record. The Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian Persian Empire were locked in a proxy conflict that had, among other consequences, blocked the western terminus of the Silk Road through Persia. The Sasanians were intercepting Sogdian silk shipments and reselling them at a markup, effectively taxing every transaction between China and Byzantium. The Turk Khaganate, whose revenues depended heavily on Sogdian trade commissions, was losing money at the institutional level. Maniak's solution was to bypass the Sasanians entirely by opening a direct diplomatic and commercial channel between the Khaganate and Byzantium, a new western route through the Caucasus. He led a diplomatic mission to Constantinople, documented in the Byzantine Chronicle of Menander Protector, and negotiated a trade agreement that established direct commercial relations between the two powers. He did not go to Constantinople as a trader. He went as a sovereign wealth manager, restructuring the network to protect the Khaganate's revenue streams. The debt reset implicit in Maniak's mission was elegant. By creating a new route, he effectively defaulted on the Sasanian toll position, not through conflict, but through structural rerouting. The Sasanians lost their extraction point. The Sogdian network gained a new correspondent node, and Maniak returned home, having done what the best financial architects always do. He changed the rules of the game without breaking them. The system reached its maximum institutional complexity under the Mongol Empire in the 13th century. Genghis Khan and his successors, particularly Mungke Khan, who ruled from 1251 to 1259, understood that the Silk Road's financial infrastructure was more valuable than its physical routes. They systematically protected Sogdian and Muslim merchant networks, guaranteed the safety of caravans under pain of severe collective punishment, and created what the historian Thomas Olson in his study, Commodity and Exchange in the Mongol Empire, describes as the first institutional framework for long-distance commercial credit at continental scale. The Mongols introduced the Ortak system, a formal commercial partnership structure in which the Khan's court provided capital to merchant partners in exchange for a defined return on investment. This was sovereign capital deployment into private commercial networks. It is structurally identical to a sovereign wealth fund co-investing with private equity, The state providing the balance sheet, the merchants providing the operational expertise and network access, with returns flowing in both directions. The 0 point of value in this system, the moment when the entire architecture became visible, came not from its success, but from its first major failure. In the 1340s, the plague moved westward along the same Silk Road routes that silk and silver had traveled for centuries. By 1347, it reached Crimea. By 1348, it was in Sicily. The Black Death did not travel by accident. It traveled along the most efficient commercial network the medieval world had built. And when it arrived, it did not just kill people. It destroyed the credit networks that Silk Road trade had created in Europe. The great Florentine banking houses, the Bardi and the Peruzzi, had extended massive credit lines to European sovereigns, capital backed directly by the anticipated revenues of Eastern trade. When the plague collapsed both the population base and the trade volumes simultaneously, the sovereign debts could not be serviced. Edward III of England defaulted on his obligations to both houses in the 1340s. Combined with the plague's demographic shock, the defaults triggered the largest financial crisis in medieval European history. Both the Bardi and the Peruzzi failed. The first great international banking system, built on the financial logic of the Silk Road, ended in a debt reset of historic proportions. The system that connected Rome to China, that financed Byzantine diplomacy and Mongol expansion, collapsed not because the routes closed, but because the trust layer that made it function was destroyed. What replaced it would take 2 centuries to build, and it began with a decision made in a landlocked city in central Italy. In 1368, the Ming dynasty completed its consolidation of power in China and issued a formal policy decision that closed the overland Silk Road routes to foreign merchants. The decision was administrative, a deliberate withdrawal from the open border commercial policy of the Mongol era, and its consequences were structural. The land-based network that had connected Eurasia for 1500 years effectively ceased to function as an integrated financial system. The routes did not vanish overnight, but the institutional framework that made value transfer reliable, the correspondent networks, the sovereign silk reserve system, the autark capital partnerships, dissolved within a generation. In Europe, the response to this closure produced the modern world. Portuguese and Spanish monarchies, facing the loss of reliable eastern supply chains and the Ottoman Empire's control of the remaining overland routes, invested in a radically different infrastructure: ocean-going vessels and the financial instruments to fund them. The joint stock company, the structural innovation that capitalized the voyages of Vasco da Gama and later the Dutch East India Company, emerged directly from the need to replace the Silk Road's distributed credit architecture with something that could function across open ocean rather than overland desert. The financial logic was identical. The Sogdian letter of credit became the bill of exchange. The caravanserai network became the correspondent bank. The silk reserve asset became gold, then silver, then eventually the dollar. The specific instruments changed. The underlying protocol: move value across distance without moving physical metal, secure the transaction with a verified network of trusted intermediaries, and charge a margin for access to the trust layer, remained constant. In 2026, the most consequential financial development building on this lineage is the global deployment of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. China's digital yuan, the eCNY, has processed over 7 trillion yuan in transactions since its launch, and its design includes a programmable settlement layer for international trade that functions, structurally, as a state-operated correspondent network. It is sovereign currency that carries embedded transaction logic, exactly what Tang silk bolts carried when their conversion ratios were encoded in imperial administrative law. The tokenization of assets that blockchain advocates present as a 21st century innovation is, in precise technical terms, the digitization of a monetary protocol that the Han dynasty was already operating 2,000 years ago. The Bitcoin network, for its part, re-engineers the Sogdian trust layer from first principles. It eliminates the correspondent intermediary by replacing reputation networks with cryptographic proof. But the underlying problem it solves is identical. How do you transfer value across distance between parties who do not share a legal jurisdiction without moving physical assets? The Sogdians solved it with witnessed contracts and family networks. Satoshi Nakamoto solved it with a distributed ledger and proof-of-work consensus. The architecture is different. The problem specification is 1,500 years old. What the full arc of this investigation reveals is something that the psychology of value has always known, even when financial theory has resisted acknowledging it. Money is not a thing. Money is a record. It is a shared agreement about who holds a claim on future resources. The Silk Road's trillion-dollar secret was never the silk, the gold, or the spice. It was the ledger, the trusted, immutable record of obligations that made value move without requiring metal to move with it. Every financial system built since, from the Medici's bill of exchange to the SWIFT network to the blockchain, is a new implementation of that same foundational insight. Control the ledger, and you control the economy. Every financial power in history has understood this. The Sogdians built it from trust and parchment. The Tang codified it in administrative law. The Mongols enforced it with the threat of annihilation. The Italian bankers institutionalized it in double-entry bookkeeping. And today, the architects of CBDCs and programmable digital currencies are building the next version of the same system. More efficient, more transparent, and more total in its reach than anything the ancient world could have imagined. The roots have changed. The medium has changed. The logic has not moved an inch. Next episode, the Medici Ledger, the secret system that built the Renaissance. In 15th century Florence, a single banking family engineered a financial instrument so powerful it financed the arts, the papacy, and the political architecture of an entire civilization. The mechanism was not a currency. It was a technique of concealment, one that changed what money could do. The financial archaeology exists for people who have stopped accepting the surface version of how wealth and power move through the world. Every episode excavates a system that shaped the present and left evidence in the archive. If you want to read the record, not the legend, subscribe. The next dig is already underway. The Sogdians moved the equivalent of trillions of dollars across deserts and empires without banks, without governments, and without the internet. Their only collateral was trust. So here's the question. If you had to move a fortune across the world today, and you could only use one thing to guarantee the deal, a legal contract, a reputation network, or a blockchain, which would you choose, and why? Drop your answer in the comments.